Derek Boogaard was, to so many fans, the embodiment of hockey's most primal impulses, a towering enforcer whose fists struck fear into the hearts of opponents across the NHL. Nicknamed the Boogeyman, he skated onto the ice at 6'7" and roughly 260 pounds, a physical presence that eclipsed nearly everyone around him. The moment he dropped his gloves, arenas would vibrate with an uneasy thrill. Supporters rose to their feet expecting violence, while rivals held their breath for the storm that was sure to follow. Yet, beneath that imposing exterior lay a gentle spirit who battled demons more terrifying than any adversary on the ice. A battle he ultimately could not win. The tragic rise and fall of Derek Boogaard remains an unsettling reminder of the human toll exacted by the role of NHL enforcer, the perils of unchecked prescription drug use, and the silent destruction that can occur behind the scenes of a seemingly glamorous professional sports career. Born on June 23, 1982, in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, Derek grew up like many Canadian boys, enamored with the national sport of hockey. He learned to skate in the frigid winters that turned lakes and ponds into makeshift rinks, forging a dream of playing in the NHL someday. Early on, Boogaard's unusual size stood out. While other kids on his peewee teams were learning technique and footwork, Derek was already an imposing figure. Coaches often spotted potential in his reach, in his ability to physically dominate corners, and in the raw strength he possessed. Still, the idea that this height and bulk could translate to a specialized role in professional hockey was not the initial blueprint for his life. Like any young hopeful, he simply wanted to make it to the show and prove that he could be valuable at the highest level. But in the junior leagues, first with the Regina Pats and then the Prince George Cougars of the Western Hockey League, Boogaard quickly discovered that physicality was his clearest path to success. Coaches, scouts, and even fans recognized that while he lacked the refined skill set of a prolific scorer or a slick puck-moving defenseman, he had an aptitude for controlled aggression. He could deter opponents from taking liberties with his smaller or more skilled teammates. He could change the momentum of a game with a single fight. Junior hockey can be a brutal proving ground, and enforcers often find a spotlight if they can shoulder the load of policing the ice. Derek, though somewhat shy off the rink, stepped into that spotlight. Like a switch, he learned to unleash an intimidating ferocity at puck drop. In the 2001 NHL entry draft, the Minnesota Wild took a chance on Boogaard in the 7th round, 202nd overall. He was not celebrated as a top prospect, nor was he guaranteed a future in the league. His skating needed improvement, and his offensive skill set was limited. But the Wild saw promise in Derek's size and his willingness to protect his peers. The path forward would be challenging. He would need seasoning in the minors, time to refine his game, and consistent displays of that trademark toughness. Yet, from the moment he signed, Boogaard had a singular objective: prove himself an indispensable piece of the puzzle by any means necessary. His professional apprenticeship began in places like the Louisiana Ice Skaters of the ECHL, and, eventually, the Houston Aeros of the AHL. Bus rides were long, living conditions modest, paychecks meager. But in these development leagues, Derek's role crystallized further. The coaches wanted a menacing enforcer, someone to stand up for the team's stars and quash any intimidation tactics from the opposition. With each fight he won, his legend grew. Fans in minor league cities across North America began to whisper about the giant who could toss opponents around like rag dolls and send a jolt of electricity through a lackluster Tuesday night game. A cult of personality was forming around him, and while he enjoyed the camaraderie of the locker room and the heartfelt appreciation from fans, the damage to his body and psyche had already begun. Fistfights on ice come with consequences: busted knuckles, chipped teeth, concussions, bruised muscles. Even in his early 20s, Derek was accumulating the physical toll that would haunt him later. By 2005, the Minnesota Wild brought him into the NHL lineup, offering him a place as their enforcer in a league still rife with brawlers and tough guys. This was a transitional period for the NHL. Rule changes after the 2004 to 2005 lockout were designed to open up the game, encourage more scoring, and reduce some of the clutch and grab tactics that had defined hockey in the late 1990s and early 2000s. Still, the appetite for big hits and old-school toughness was hardly gone. Fans relish seeing two heavyweights square off at center ice, and the wild faithful quickly latched onto Boogaard as a folk hero. When he fought, the crowd erupted. Children wore t-shirts with Boogeyman on the back, relishing the performance he brought to every game. But while fans cheered the spectacle, Derek's job was a lonely one. Enforcers, by nature, carry a certain burden. They often feel a moral obligation to protect their teammates, to stand up for star players, and to maintain the code that so many hockey purists speak of, a code in which you do not injure another team's best player without expecting retribution. When a cheap shot landed on a Minnesota forward, Boogaard was the one who had to drop his gloves. Many nights this responsibility felt less like a choice and more like a duty he could never escape, and it was dangerous. Each fight came with a risk of concussive impacts or worse. Enforcers frequently develop nagging injuries that require pain management just to stay in the lineup. Over time, the line between necessary medical treatment and self-destructive reliance on painkillers blurred. Off the ice, Derek was known to teammates as a gentle giant. He was shy, soft-spoken, even kind-hearted. Stories circulated of him signing autographs for children long after practice had ended, or quietly paying for a meal for strangers who recognized him. These anecdotes painted a picture far from the menacing Boogeyman label he carried on the rink. Yet, that duality often gnawed at him. In the locker room, he sometimes confided that he hated fighting, that it brought him anxiety, but he had to do it for the team. If he stopped, he feared losing his job. The pressure to maintain that role, combined with the physical aftermath of each brawl, left Derek increasingly reliant on prescription medication. It wasn't just the immediate injuries that plagued him. The looming cloud of concussions began to form. Even though fights often ended quickly, each punch to the head could result in a subconcussive blow. Over the course of a season, the accumulation of such hits is significant. When combined with accidental hits on the ice, big checks into the boards, collisions in front of the net, stray elbows, Boogaard's brain was under constant assault. He would later experience headaches, bouts of depression, and emotional volatility, symptoms that many medical professionals have now linked to chronic traumatic encephalopathy, CTE. At the time, the understanding of CTE in hockey was less advanced than it is today, and the NHL's concussion protocols were more rudimentary. Players were frequently cleared to return, unless they exhibited obvious signs of disorientation. Derek, like many, would often downplay or hide certain symptoms to avoid being sidelined. After all, an enforcer who can't fight is at risk of losing his roster spot. In 2010, the New York Rangers, a franchise steeped in history and longings for a return to dominance, signed Derek Boogaard to a 4-year, $6.5 million contract. It was an announcement that turned heads. Enforcers rarely command such high-paying long-term deals. The move spoke volumes about how much the Rangers valued Derek's presence on the ice, or at least the intimidation factor he brought. In a media capital like New York, he found himself under a brighter spotlight than ever before. Fans at Madison Square Garden, notorious for their high expectations and craving for on-ice fireworks, cheered thunderously every time he squared up with an opposing tough guy. Boogaard's Ranger jersey, emblazoned with the number 94, later changed to 57 in honor of a friend, sold briskly among a crowd eager for a new cult hero. Yet the transition to New York came with even more pressure. The team expected him to police the ice and energize the crowd. The media asked repetitive questions about his fighting. Online clips of his biggest knockouts circulated widely, fueling his mythos. But behind the closed doors of the training room, Derek struggled with injuries and the ongoing cycle of pain medication. Doctors wrote him prescriptions for powerful opioids to manage the agony of broken fingers, fractured orbital bones, battered knuckles, and the myriad aches that came from his style of play. While these prescriptions began with medical oversight, the chaos of an NHL season, where team doctors, personal physicians, and the demands of daily games or travel overlap, fostered an environment where Derek could procure medications from multiple sources. The lines blurred between legitimate need and dangerous excess. The enforcer role had become not just a job, but an identity that Derek felt compelled to maintain. Even after a severe concussion sustained in a fight during the 2010-11 season, he pushed himself to recover quickly. His final season was marred by attempts to come back before he was fully healed, and by stints in rehab facilities when his prescription drug use began spiraling out of control. Stories emerged of him disappearing from team functions, seeking pills from acquaintances, and grappling with the shame he felt for not being able to handle it on his own. Despite the hush-hush nature of substance issues in professional sports, rumors circulated among fans and reporters that the Rangers were concerned. In a sport that prizes grit, players are often reluctant to admit vulnerability. For Derek, acknowledging that he needed help felt like an admission of weakness, something an enforcer, by definition, can never show. A few short months later, on May 13, 2011, the hockey world was stunned. Derek Boogaard was found dead in his Minneapolis apartment at the age of 28. The cause? An accidental overdose of oxycodone mixed with alcohol. The outpouring of grief from teammates, fans, and even rival enforcers was immediate and profound. Those who knew him spoke of his kindness, of how he always took a moment to talk to a young fan, sign an autograph, or crack a wry smile in private. Yet the tributes underscored a grim reality. One of the toughest men on the ice had fought an invisible battle with addiction and head trauma that none of his formidable physical attributes could conquer. In the weeks and months following his death, more details emerged. It became clear that Derek had been to rehab more than once in the year leading up to his passing. He had been caught forging prescriptions or doctor shopping in an attempt to feed his growing opioid dependence. Tragically, he had also experienced multiple concussions, with at least one severe blow that season. His family, in their grief, struggled to piece together how the league and the team doctors could have missed the severity of his condition. Frustration and anger mounted when it was discovered how easy it had been for him to collect medication from various sources, with limited oversight. Lawsuits were filed, alleging that the NHL and its medical personnel were negligent in prescribing him so many painkillers without properly monitoring his use. Following his death, his family decided to donate brain to Boston University's Center for the Study of Traumatic Encephalopathy. When the results were announced, doctors stated that Boogaard's brain showed advanced signs of CTE for someone his age. The numerous hits to the head, be it from fights, body checks, or accidental collisions, had cumulatively damaged his brain tissue. CTE can lead to a laundry list of symptoms: depression, memory loss, impulsive behavior, mood swings, and a higher propensity for substance abuse. The conclusion was inescapable. Derek Boogaard had been a casualty not only of prescription drugs and the pressure to perform, but also of a degenerative brain disease that, at the time, was still only beginning to be widely acknowledged in hockey circles. His death at 28 was a clarion call for those within hockey to reevaluate how they see the men behind the masks. Had the league, the team, or the doctors intervened sooner and recognized the signs of addiction and CTE, perhaps Derek could have received the help he so desperately needed. If the culture surrounding enforcers had shifted, if fighting had been less central, if painkillers had been doled out more carefully, there might have been a different ending to his story. He might have retired eventually, become a coach or mentor, and shared with young players the lessons of perseverance and sacrifice. Instead, his unfinished life is a stark memorial, reminding us that the spectacle of big hits and big fights can claim victims in ways that box scores will never reveal.